Today we will explore Sage X3's web scheduler. We begin our web scheduling journey in X3. I've configured certain types of work orders for automatic straight-through scheduling. This could be for back-to-back work orders or work orders that are generated from MRP suggestions, so that these work orders can go straight through to the scheduler as soon as they are created. This setting is configurable based on your scheduling policy, whether it be manual or automatic. So your ability to configure which order types to auto-schedule makes scheduling of work orders super easy. I have recently run MRP for site NAO12. So let's look at our latest batch of MRP suggestions. I'm going to do that through the Enterprise Planning Workbench. I have created a criteria filter, which I will recall and will use to filter our MRP suggestions for bike. And if I scroll down, you'll see that there are a couple of entries in this workbench to show customer firm work orders for which MRP made work order suggestions. If I scroll this screen all the way down, you will see that there is a work order at the bottom for a quantity of 77, which corresponds to this customer order for FIN 006. If we bring up the ellipsis for that sales order, you see that that is sales order number 74. If we go to the work order at the bottom, we'll see that this is work order 307. Let's go ahead and bring that up. Now in this work order, if we start by going into the ellipsis for FIN 006, let's go into the release product detail. And in that release product detail, it shows that in fact, this work order is pegged to sales order number 74, the one that we saw in the Enterprise Workbench. A couple of web scheduler specific details that I'd like to show you in this work order. First, in components, there is a new column purpose-built for the web scheduler called First Availability. And this column is significant since our scheduler uses first date of material availability, otherwise referred to as FDMA, to determine when an operation can be scheduled. Essentially, FDMA dictates that an operation scheduled runtime is a function of when its entire material quantity becomes available. If we look at the operations section, we see that there is another new column, earliest start. And what this shows is what is the earliest possible start date for this work order. This is also a function of FDMA. And since this work order has all of its materials ready to go, we can start immediately, today being the 22nd of December. Another feature I'd like to show is by going up into the upper right hand of the screen, going into scheduling. Let's take a graphical look at the scheduling of this work order. We do that by selecting graph. This is a nice feature because you can simply hover over each routing operation and you will see the start and end times and the duration of each operation, and so forth. So now we'll go ahead and close out of this work order and the Enterprise Workbench. So now that we've explored how we can configure work orders to be automatically submitted to the scheduler, let's quickly review a tool that can be used to manually submit groups of work orders en masse, and that is the Submit for Scheduling. Submit for Scheduling, you can use this function to select one or a range of work orders for scheduling. You can do it by project, you can do it by destination, for example, customer site. You can do it by range of products. You can do it by range of work orders. In addition, you can specify submit to the scheduler all my planned work orders, all my firm work orders, all of my WOSs or work order suggestions. So you can specify WOP, WF, WOS. In fact, I used this mass submission screen to schedule the work order suggestions that MRP made to cover our sales forecast demand. So that's a quick review of how easy it is to submit your work orders for scheduling. Now let's turn our attention to the scheduler itself. I'm running a Chrome browser, and that is just one of many types of browsers supported. Keep in mind that the web scheduler is seamlessly integrated. All data that appears in the web scheduler is imported directly from X3. Let's begin with a review of the look and feel, starting with the menu bar and the title bar. You'll see here next to this silhouette is the user profile. You also see a question mark. If I click into the question mark, that'll give me access to the web scheduler help function, including the user manual. You also see in the menu bar that my work group that I'm going to be planning for. In this case, I am planning for the entire site NA012. You'll see the scheduling period, and you'll see the planned version that I'm focusing on right now. Let's tour key pull-down menus, beginning with the general menu. I'd like to zero in on multi-simulation. Multi-simulation enables you to save multiple copies and compare and contrast each planned simulation to ultimately choose best fit. This is a great feature because this enables a planner to essentially create multiple what-if scenarios, compare and contrast, see each planned simulation's impact on operational utilization and capacity load, and again, to choose best fit. You'll see that I have the master version, which I'm currently focusing on now, but I've also created another planned simulation which I called test candidate. In addition, when you bring up the multi-simulation screen, you'll actually show, the web scheduler actually shows key KPIs telling you for each planned simulation that you've created, for each what-if scenario, what are the essential key performance indice values associated with each. I've configured mine to show me schedulable orders, scheduled orders, delayed orders, early orders, and on-time orders. And you see that the numbers can vary based on the different simulations. Now, before we dive in to the web scheduler, I'd just like to do a quick review of key scheduler benefits. Sage's X3 web scheduling is a web-based solution for the planning of production work orders. As we saw earlier, these could be planned, firm, or MRP suggested work orders. The scheduler features automatic scheduling optimization that allows for further user manual editing and overrides. Another big feature is that multiple planners can work within the same scheduling environment. This is essential for shops that must schedule multiple production lines that produce different products that in turn all roll up into a master plan. The web scheduler is governed by resource constraints, namely machine, labor, and material constraints, FDMA. Our web scheduler helps you to synchronize your entire supply chain, identify missing materials, remove bottlenecks, and proactively address disruptive events. So let's go ahead and schedule our work orders using the automatic scheduler, otherwise referred to as the optimizer. If we scroll down, you will see that in an area that we call the fishing pond, there are numerous operations, all unscheduled, as you see in this column here. Now we're going to go ahead and run the automatic scheduler. While that's running, let me just point out that the web scheduler provides a powerful and flexible automated scheduling tool, the optimizer. The optimizer publishes an optimal and feasible production sequence, given resource constraints in accordance with each order's expected due date. So we see that having run this, you now see operations that appear in what we refer to as the production Gantt. So the automatic scheduler's algorithm's output is a production plan that can be saved as is. You could look at the optimized plan that it yielded and decide, yeah, I I'm fine and I agree with the way that it is scheduled all my work orders and their operations, or use this as a basis for manual editing. Here's a quick review of the screen, beginning with your resource tree. So if I expand these, what you are seeing is all of my, in this case, my work group, in this case, NAO 12, my entire site's work center groups, and all of their associated work centers. If I look at the production Gantt panel, this part of the screen right here, we have a resource column which shows only the work centers that are involved with my plan. So you see the name of the work center, in this case, Lab 001, the assembly operator. Below that, you see something that says parmash equals 3. Parmash stands for default parallel machine value. This number indicates how many of the operations this work center can perform simultaneously. That value is actually taken directly from X3's work center number of resources field and is passed over to the scheduler. If we look at the Gantt grid, you'll see that I've got a timeline here. If I go into this calendar icon, you'll see that I'm just planning for this 1 week, beginning on the 18th. I can also expand and contract the length of this grid. The other thing I'd like to point out is the gray. The gray denotes downtime. So downtime could be between shifts, calendar downtime, weekends, holidays, maintenance, changeovers. In this particular case, we are looking at a shift that runs from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. with a 2-hour break beginning at noon and lasting through until 2 p.m. Now, I'd just like to point out that when you see an operation that seemingly is running during a downtime, that is not what this means. This is a visual tenet to make it easier to manage your orders. It simply traverses the downtime so that, for example, if I were to move this operation into just white space, the actual length of this operation bar would shorten. It is elongated to straddle over the downtime. I'd like to speak quickly about decoration rules. This web scheduler features decoration rules that provide the ability to add and define custom rules to automatically highlight specific cells or rows meeting your custom criteria. For example, here we are using color coding for on-time tracking of operations. So for example, if I scroll down, you will see various colors. Red is late, orange is delayed by more than 10 days. Yellow is that the work order scheduled end date is later than the due date, but delayed by less than 10 days. But as planners, we'd prefer to deal in light green and dark green. Light green is on time or early less than 10 days. Dark green is earlier, more than 10 days early. You can also use decoration rules to further color code to indicate special situations. For example, let's say that I'm a paint manufacturer and I'm running a campaign for blue paint. I could actually color code all of those work orders and their associated operations blue that are a part of that campaign. Let's take a look now at operation details, beginning with looking at an operation itself. You notice that when I clicked on that operation bar in the production Gantt, in the fishing pond, it scrolled to highlight what I'm focusing on. In each operation bar, the essential details of that operation are stamped directly onto the bar. Here we see that this particular operation is associated with work order 291, the material output, the finished good, or the subassembly, in this case, is SFI 009. This is operation number 5. In addition, let's go to Lab 001 and let's just click on an operation. If I double click on that operation, a pop-up comes up giving me essential information in the form of both a product tab and order information. If looking at the product information, I see that this operation starts at this time, ends at this time. Its duration is indicated here. The scheduled quantity is associated with that work order, which incidentally, if that quantity looks familiar, this is the same work order that was generated from the enterprise workbench. If I go to order information, it shows me the parent order and other useful information. The other thing that happened when I clicked on that operation is you notice that a blue line appeared. If I scroll down, that blue line will show you the sequence of operations associated with that parent work order 307. Here's the second operation, and so forth. Okay, so after first describing the essential purpose of each section of this screen, each panel, the production Gantt, the fishing pond, and we'll take a look at the resource Gantt as well, I'll demonstrate examples of typical planner interactions with our schedule from each of these. Beginning with the production Gantt. So I want to begin by discussing Gantt icons. Gantt icons are used to alert you to some constraint alerts. So for example, here we are looking at Work Center Mac 16, an assembly bench. Here we're looking at operation 20 of work order 307. During all manual operations performed in the web scheduler, the system dynamically checks in real time the constraints of materials, machines, and manpower. So for example, I'm simply going to select this operation and move it to start just a little bit earlier. Now notice, before I even release this operation, on the left-hand side, you notice that a number of work centers have highlighted in a darker blue. This is actually telling me that I can actually drag and drop this operation to any of those that are color-coded in that darker blue, as they have been configured in the work center definition as replacement work centers. That helps the automatic scheduler to load balance across all of those, but also enables me in my manual overrides of the pre-optimized schedule to drag and drop this operation to any of those that are specified as replacement work centers. So I'm just going to release here, but you notice before I even released, the scheduler is checking in real time to see if the result of my override to the plan will introduce any resource constraint. And in fact it has. You'll see in the operation it's embedded a box icon. So that box icon is telling me that I have introduced a material constraint. In this case, this stems from the fact that I have actually dragged and dropped the second in a sequence of operations to start before the first operation completed. And this input arrow implies that this operation actually requires the material output of the first operation. Hence the appearance of that box icon. Okay, so the next thing I want to look at is a forced move that we actually want to use to override the automatic scheduler. Let's go to Mac 05. Now I'm going to double click on this operation that appears to be queued against the Mac 05 Work Center. When I do that, the reason I'm doing it in this case is to show you that you'll recall that we talked about replacement work centers and that the automatic scheduler can use them to load balance, but I can also use those replacement work centers to move operations to other work centers. Now I could do that as I just double clicked on that operation directly from this pop-up. If we go to scheduling resource, it'll show me all of the eligible replacement or alternative work centers that I can move this operation to. Simply by selecting the alternate work center from here, that will do the move. Or I can just simply, directly from the production Gantt, drag and drop it and locate it myself. So what I've done is I've moved this operation off of Mac 05 and placed it behind an operation queued against Mac 004. While I'm doing that, keep in mind that all resource constraints and rules are considered by the scheduler in real time as the move action is in progress. So let's say we want to enforce the sequence of these operations. So in other words, I want to set in stone that this operation is processed first against the work center, followed by this. I can do that simply by going to this icon, the set priority sequence icon, and selecting that. You see a consequence of that is that it has stamped the sequence directly onto those operations. Now, we also want to dedicate this forced sequence to Mac 004. Not only do we want them done in this sequence, we want to set in stone that these can only be run through this work center. We can do that by going to the chain link icon, the fixed to resource icon, and selecting that for the operations as well. So I've set in stone that these two operations can only run in Mac 004 in this sequence. Let's take a look at the fishing pond. It's a funny name, but it's apt because you can actually drag and drop work orders and their associated operations directly from the fishing pond onto the production Gantt. So you're sort of going fishing. Each column can be dragged and dropped directly from the fishing pond. In addition, the columns are filterable. I can also just drag columns to locate them, place them anywhere I like in the sequence that I like. To filter, you'll see that in the first column, order code, I've got a number of entries that begin with SUG. These actually are the suggested work orders and their associated operations that correspond to the suggestions that I sent en masse from the submit for scheduling for the to meet our sales forecast demand. Now, I can go into order code and let's just show an example of filtering. I could say, only show me the things that start with WO. By doing that, what I've done effectively is filtered out those suggestions, and now I'm just looking at those that start with work order. Quick review: the fishing pond, key fields, order code, operation number, the material output, the description of that material output, the order quantity, the scheduled quantity. What is the scheduling status for all of these operations? When is the scheduled start and end times? What is the due date for each one of the parent work orders and their associated operations and so forth? And again, you can go into a wrench and add and change and remove, effectively custom tailor those columns that are important that you'd like to view as a part of your fishing pond. So let's look at a typical interaction from our fishing pond. Interacting with work orders and their operations to build and change your schedule is not limited to the production Gantt. They are actionable from both the fishing pond and the resource Gantt as well. In fact, each has their respective advantages depending on what you want to accomplish. So in the production Gantt, let's look for Mac 95. And we're going to select Mac 95. And we're going to click on the second operation. And again, the second operation is queued up against Mac 95. As soon as I clicked on it, again, in the fishing pond, it scrolled to what I've selected in the production Gantt. Now I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to delete that. Now you'll notice in the Mac 95 Work Center that's created a gap. This does not have the effect of actually deleting the operation from the scheduler. A deletion simply removes the operation from its slot in the Work Center queue and changes its status from scheduled to unscheduled in the fishing pond. I'm using this example simply to demonstrate that you can always move work orders from the fishing pond directly from the fishing pond into the production Gantt. So you'll see that I've created that gap through deletion, and what I'm going to do is, you'll notice that as soon as I deleted that operation, it changed the status to unscheduled. I'm just simply going to move that operation manually and put it back. And again, the reason I'm doing that is to show you that, if you, depending on what you're doing as a planner, if you prefer to fill your production Gantt, by making selections directly from the fishing pond, that's fine. And in many cases, that's the best way to, approach building your plan. Okay, so let's take a look at the resource Gantt. And let's pick another work center, Mac 13. The resource Gantt displays all work order operations queued for the work center that I've selected in my production Gantt. I'm going to select advanced delay for my desired color scheme for the resource Gantt. Now, I'd like to start by pointing out what I refer to as the capacity bar. The capacity bar, first of all, remember par mash? The parallel machine value for this particular work center is 2, which means that it can actually concurrently process 2 operations simultaneously. And you see in the resource Gantt that the operations queued up are taking advantage of that concurrency. The work center is available from 8 a.m. to 12 with that 2-hour break that I've defined in my timetable schema in X3, followed by the second half of the shift, which is from 2 to 6. Now, let's say that I actually want to override the automatic scheduler, in this case, directly from the resource Gantt. And I'll do that by selecting the work order 280 operation 20. And let's say that in this case, I want to move the start date time for this particular operation to start on January 19th at 8 a.m. Okay, now watch when I move it. You will see the concurrent resource utilization values change. You also notice in the production Gantt, alternate work centers highlight in blue. Now I'm going to move that to start at 8 a.m. And you notice that value has changed in the resource Gantt as we expected. And in addition, in the production Gantt, it takes me to the start time that I've moved that operation to. So again, anything that I do in the production Gantt, the operation I'm working on in the production Gantt will be scrolled to in both the fishing pond and the resource Gantt, and vice versa. So let's say that I want to set that start time in stone. Well, I do that by clicking the pin icon. And you notice when I've done that in the production Gantt, it put a timestamp of the desired start time for that operation. Okay, now let's take a look at how to do group moves. So we're going to go down to Mac 16, and again, from the resource Gantt. Let's say that Mac 16 is scheduled for maintenance, and we want to run a what-if simulation to gauge the impact of offloading that work center's operations upon capacity load. So in other words, as a planner, I know that there is downtime scheduled for that work center for maintenance, and I want to actually model the impact on overall throughput and performance and capacity on my shop floor first. So what I'm going to do is, from Mac 16 in the resource Gantt, I'm going to select all of the operations that I want to move off of Mac 16. And I'm going to put them to a clipboard. You see that my cursor is on this clipboard icon. As soon as I do that, you'll see on the right-hand side of the resource Gantt, I can bring up the selected activities. This is useful as it shows me all of the operations I plan to move off of Mac 16, but it also shows me all of the alternate work centers that I can move them to. Now, I want to move these to Mac 14. So in the production Gantt, you see that I've just clicked on Mac 14. Now, I want the operations that I moved off of Mac 16 to run first. So I want to front load them. So let's go to the beginning of the queue for Mac 14. And what I'm going to do is, having clicked on the Mac 14 Work Center, I am going to select the first operation in the resource Gantt. That is telling the scheduler to move all of those operations that I'm moving off of Mac 16 to front load them to be the first ones to queue up against Mac 14 now. Having selected that first operation in the Mac 14 queue, I now, once again, hit a clipboard icon where you see my mouse cursor is, and you see the little left tab here, or the right tab. The left says insert the selected activities from Mac 16 before the operation or after. I want to put them before, so I'm going to click this one. Now, once I've done that, you see that in the resource Gantt that the operations that I selected in Mac 16 were now front loaded on Mac 16. On Mac 14, excuse me. So if we scroll over, you'll see, sure enough, those first three operations took precedent and were front loaded. And also, Mac 16 has been cleared out so that I can simulate the impact of losing Mac 16 and having to effectively load balance or offload them onto alternate work centers. Okay? So now that I've done that, let's gauge the impact of offloading that work center's operations upon capacity load. I do that by going into the capacity load report. Now, what have we done? We've moved all of operations off of Mac 16, put them on Mac 14, and as a planner, we need to determine whether or not the impact of that is acceptable, and if it is, then we would ultimately publish a plan back to X3 that includes offloading all those operations from Mac 16 for the purposes of scheduling that downtime for maintenance. Now, we know, for example, that Mac 14 is in the Work Center group GMA07, so that when the load report comes up, we'll look for GMA07. So I'll expand our site and the associated Work Center groups, and we'll look for GMA07. And here it is. Now, we know that we want to gauge the impact of performance that offloading those operations from Mac 16 has created for the Mac 14 Work Center. Just generally as a planner, when you bring up this capacity load report, if you go to this column, the load column, this will give you a quick visual understanding of where your potential bottlenecks are, expressed in percentages. For us, again, we want to focus on Mac 14, so I'm just going to double click on that. Having double clicked on that, you'll see that two bars are created. Excuse me. The green bar is showing me the number of hours that Mac 14 will be processing operations. If I scroll down, we see that in fact, offloading the Mac 16 operations onto Mac 14 are causing the utilization of those work centers to butt up against capacity, to the point where for each shift, across each shift, so we see a shift here, shift here, shift here, shift here, to the point where it's actually introducing a delay of roughly 39 hours. So This is a great way for a planner to be able to communicate to the operations manager, the impact of that scheduled maintenance. Now, in our case, we're okay with the impact on capacity load because we really have to do that maintenance. So we're going to save our plan back to X3, even with the situation where the offloading of those operations have created a capacity issue for Mac 014. It's within acceptable tolerance for us. So having done the what if scenario cause and effect impact analysis, we actually do want to go ahead and save this plan and publish it back to X3. So I'm going to save the modifications, and also, good citizenship in the web scheduler. The last thing that you do is you actually go ahead and unlock the resources that you've frozen, so that other planners can't mess with the underlying work centers during your plan session. So I'm just basically going to go ahead and unlock that, and that ends my session. So then what I would do next is that I would export this plan into X3, and this plan would ripple through X3, and that would become my new schedule. Now that we've simulated the impact of downtime and we're okay with it, we've entered we published our plan back in X3. I want to show you how you would basically enter in that downtime in X3. And so I'm just going to relog in because we timed out. And we do that by going into the actual Mac 16 Work Center. So I'm going to search for Mac 016, and it is NA012's Mac 16 Work Center that we're concerned with. This is the one that we want to enter in the downtime for maintenance. And we do that in the capacity variation section of work centers. And you see that I've pre-entered the range for the maintenance period. It is to start on the 18th, which is today, and it is going to end on the 25th. And the reason is for maintenance. You can enter in all of the different values you like here. It's entirely configurable. I've selected MNT for maintenance. So having done that, what I would then do is that I would re-import this information into the web scheduler. And by doing that, the values would be updated and refreshed so that the scheduler would not schedule any operations against this Mac 16 Work Center during this period of downtime. So what I've shown you today is a bird's eye view, high-level overview of the Sage X3 web scheduler. Thank you.